Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and it is time to sit down and film my final 2 reviews of 2022, hopefully. We'll see if any of the books that I finish in December, if I'll do reviews for them or not. But anyway, the review I am here to do today is for The Widow Queen by Elżbieta Czeresinska, which is the first book in, I believe, a duology, which is just called The Bold on Goodreads. I just always go by Goodreads series title names because where else would I get the series titles from? But anyway, this is a historical fantasy-ish series that was translated from Polish. I read this for my Reading International Fantasy video. I did that video finally in November, so I will leave that link down below and up there. And yeah, let's talk about my thoughts on this book. And as always, I will start with a little synopsis and then I will get into my negative thoughts and end with my positive thoughts. So The Widow Queen is basically a fictionalized biography. It's a biography of this Polish princess from the end of the 10th century called Sviatoslava. And she is the daughter of who I believe was like the first king of Poland, this really important man at the end of the 10th century. And the thing is, as his most prized daughter, her kind of main mission is to marry someone who will bring an alliance with him for her father. And that is what she does. And you just kind of follow her life as she marries, as she tries to take charge of her own fate, and as she, through that, kind of influences the politics of the entire region, as well as the entirety of the northern part of Europe during the end of the 10th century. As I said, it's kind of a fictionalized biography because the name of Sviatoslava, like, I am just saying this from the author word, but this name apparently appears in the biographies of multiple of the, you know, big names of the time in Europe. And Sviatoslava herself, however, there isn't really that much known about her, aside from that she apparently was married or a relative to a lot of these like very big shots of the end of the 10th century. And so the author set out to write a fictionalized biography for this princess, for this woman, and to give her a voice. And that is what this book is. And as it said, at the end of the 10th century in Poland, as well as Scandinavia, Denmark, there's also a lot of Viking stuff going on and Viking history going on in this book. And so yeah, it's a very historical book. And that is also where, when going into my thoughts of this book, where I think some of the possibly negatives come in. I mean, I really enjoyed it, but this book in a way is very dry. It is very historical. And I think you need to somewhat have a grasp of the history of the time to understand some things. Like, there were some things where I'm not sure. For example, I'm currently working at a money museum and there were parts of the book where the minting of coins was very important. If I hadn't started working at a money museum in July, I wouldn't have understood the history of minting the way I understand it now, and I wouldn't properly have grasped those parts of the story. So I think there's multiple parts like this where I think you should at least have heard some of the names before going into this book. Otherwise, I don't think you wouldn't enjoy the book if you haven't heard the names, but I think they definitely add to the enjoyment of the book. Like, an understanding of European history, of Eastern Northern European history around the 10th century, the end of the 10th century, I think definitely adds to the enjoyment of this book. But I think at the same time, it's just beautiful because it kind of shows you what you miss sometimes when you read or when you don't read books that are translated, because obviously this is translated from Polish. This is written by a Polish author who understands more of Polish history, and where a lot of the history that is talked about in this book is more immediately important to people living in Poland, and that they probably learn in school a lot more. I didn't learn that. I'm from Austria. I didn't learn about Polish medieval history in school. And so I think when you read this book and when you're not understanding things, I think it's good to remind yourself that you were probably not the intended audience for this book, and that's probably why you don't understand what's going on. But yeah, I think that's the main negative, I would say, of this book, that some things you just need context knowledge to fully grasp what is going on, and that it can get quite dry sometimes, which is also why it took me a while to get into this story. It is sometimes very much written like a biography, like it's written like an action biography. It's not necessarily written in a way where the characters go through massive amounts of like character arcs or character development, but a lot of what is going on in this book is rather dry. I enjoyed that. I think it really fit the writing style. I think it really fit the story, but you know, if you're expecting a very involved fantasy type action story, that is not what this book is. And then the last thing in terms of negative stuff that I have is actually to do with the marketing of the book, because the book, at least on Goodreads, was marketed as historical fantasy. And last year, like this was published in 2021, I believe, I did also see it on multiple fantasy anticipated releases lists. However, I'm not sure if I would call this book fantasy or even historical fantasy. Like, the absolute maximum that happens in this book is that there's sometimes some people have visions. That's the extent of fantasy in this book. I would really probably more likely describe this as historical fiction, just straight up historical fiction. No fantasy included, really. But of course, that's not the fault of the book. That is more the fault of the marketing of the book. So now for positives. I said that the characters don't really go through massive amounts of character development, which is true. However, I still did find the characters really, really engaging. I found them really interesting. I just really enjoyed Sviatoslava as a character. I don't know, something about her just really grabbed my interest. She is a very determined person. She is a person who understands what her place is. She does not actively fight her place in the world. Like, she's not one of those female main characters who just absolutely is, you know, heartbroken that she has to go into this arranged marriage. Like, yes, she does love someone else, and she is sad about the arranged marriage, but it's not the type of woe is me sad. It's like, yeah, okay, she kind of regrets it, now moving on. What can I do to make my situation better? She also lives as a Christian queen in a country that is still pagan. She has grown up Christian. Like, we kind of see the early stages of Christianity in a lot of these countries. So it's just very interesting what she does to, you know, Christianize the people sometimes. What she does to make sure to further her causes, but also further her religion's causes. And I just thought that the way that was written was really interesting. I liked how many different perspectives we got to see. We got to see a lot of perspectives of also Sviatoslava's suitors and of the perspectives of the different kings that she marries. And yeah, it's just very, very interesting. And some of those people you kind of like at the beginning of the story, but the more the story goes on, you like them less and less. And others you really don't like at the beginning, but the more the story goes on, you like them more and more. And so I just think the characters are really interesting in this story. I also loved, even with the criticism that I said, or how it's not for everyone, personally, I just love the kind of historicism of this book. I loved how steeped in history it was. For me, it's just really nice because I don't know a lot about Polish history, as I said earlier. I don't know that much about Northern European, Eastern European history in general. But there were just little things, little names or places that I recognized because, funnily enough, I learned about all those things this year. For example, I went to Copenhagen this year in summer, and when I went there I also went to Roskilde, which was this old Viking stronghold town in Denmark, where they also found like some really well preserved Viking boats, ships. And I went to that museum and I learned about Roskilde, and I learned about the history of the Vikings or the Norse people, the Danish people, and I learned about all those names. And then suddenly all of those names appeared in this book, and I was like, I know about this now. I can actually, you know, not put faces to what is said here, but, you know, I can see the story in context way better than I would have been able to if I had read it 2021. So maybe it was a good thing. Maybe like the universe knew that I had to wait to read this book. And then the same thing was also the case, as I said, with the minting of coins. Like, the minting of coins is a somewhat important subplot in the second half of the story. And yeah, I would not have understood anything about that subplot. I probably would not even have known what a mint is, to be honest. Because where would I have learned that word in English? Like, where would I have learned what a mint is? So yeah, I just would have never understood that subplot in the second half of the book if I had not started working at the Money Museum. And so there were just a lot of things about that that made my reading experience with this book just absolutely amazing. Aside from that, the plot, yeah, I can't say anything to its historical accuracy, to be honest, because yeah, I also don't care that much about the historical accuracy. Like, if it seems historically accurate with historical fiction, I'm usually fine with it. And that's definitely the case here. And so, yeah, overall, I think I can really recommend this series, this book. I do want to continue on with the series. I think Svetoslava is a really, really unique and interesting main character. And so, yeah, that was it for this review. If you have read this book, tell me in the comments down below what were your thoughts on it. If you haven't read this book, tell me, do you want to pick it up? If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media as well as to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where I read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman or genderqueer person per month, will be left linked down below, so go and check those out. And I hope I'll see you very soon. Bye!